Elena felt a familiar chill. The phrase "particular skill set" was intelligence community speak for skills that couldn't be discussed in polite company. Skills like long-range assassination, infiltration, and elimination of high-value targets. "I'm retired," Elena said firmly. Elena Vasquez is a shooting competitor, not a soldier. "Elena Vasquez is a fiction," Hayes replied calmly. "A very well-crafted fiction, but a fiction nonetheless. And unfortunately, the situation we're facing requires Captain Morrison's expertise." "What situation?" Agent Chun slid a tablet across the table. The screen showed satellite imagery of what appeared to be a military compound in a desert environment. "This facility is located in Somalia, approximately 40 miles inland from Mogadishu. 3 weeks ago, it was captured by a terrorist organization, calling itself the New Caliphate." Elena studied the imagery, her military training automatically analyzing the compound's defensive positions, sightlines, and potential vulnerabilities. The facility was well designed, with multiple redundant security measures and carefully planned fields of fire. "What was the facility?" she asked. "Officially, it was a humanitarian aid coordination center," Hayes said. "Unofficially, it was a forward operating base for a joint counterterrorism task force involving American, British, and French special operations units." Elena looked up from the tablet. "How many hostages?" 17, Agent Chun said quietly. 12 Americans, 3 British, 2 French. All military or intelligence personnel. The New Caliphate is demanding the release of 50 imprisoned terrorists in exchange for the hostages' lives." It was a familiar scenario, one that Elena had been briefed on dozens of times during her military career. Hostage situations involving military personnel were politically and operationally complex, with multiple agencies and governments involved in any response. "And you want me to do what, exactly?" Elena asked, though she was beginning to suspect. She already knew the answer. "The compound has been under surveillance for 3 weeks, Hayes explained. "We've identified the terrorist leadership, mapped their security procedures, and developed intelligence on their capabilities. But there's a problem." Agent Chun touched the tablet screen, zooming in on a specific building within the compound. "The hostages are being held in this structure. It's heavily guarded, and any conventional assault would almost certainly result in multiple hostage deaths. But," Hayes continued, "there's a position approximately 800 meters from the compound, where a skilled sniper could potentially eliminate the key terrorist leaders simultaneously, creating enough confusion for a rescue team to extract the hostages." 800 meters. Elena had made successful shots at greater distances, but an 800-meter shot in combat conditions, with multiple targets that needed to be engaged in rapid succession, was at the very limit of what was humanly possible. "Why me?" Elena asked. "There are other military snipers who could potentially make these shots." "Are there?" Agent Chun challenged. "Your military record shows confirmed kills at distances up to 2,000 meters. More importantly, you've successfully engaged multiple targets in rapid succession under combat conditions. That combination of range and speed is extraordinarily rare." Elena realized they had done their homework. Her classified military records contained details that even she sometimes preferred to forget. Missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Somalia, where she'd eliminated enemy combatants with surgical precision from distances that seemed impossible to civilian minds. "Besides," Hayes added, "this mission requires someone who doesn't officially exist. If something goes wrong, if you're captured or killed, there can be no connection back to any government agency. Elena Vasquez, the shooting competitor, might disappear on a hunting trip. Captain Morrison is already dead. The brutal calculus of intelligence operations hadn't changed. Deniable assets, expendable operatives, missions that couldn't be acknowledged even if they succeeded. Elena had hoped those days were behind her, but apparently, the skills that made her valuable also made her a permanent target for recruitment. What about the other hostages? Elena asked. Military personnel captured in classified operations. Don't they deserve official rescue attempts? Of course they do, Agent Chun said. And those attempts are being planned. But conventional rescue operations, in this environment, have a high probability of failure. The terrain favors the defenders, the compound is well fortified, and the terrorists have demonstrated willingness to execute hostages rather than lose their bargaining position. Hayes slid another document across the table. 2 days ago, they executed one of the British hostages to demonstrate their seriousness. A Special Air Service sergeant named David Williams, 34 years old, married, 2 children. Elena looked at the photograph of Sergeant Williams, recognizing the type immediately. He had the lean, weathered look of a career special operations soldier, someone who'd spent years in dangerous places doing dangerous work. Someone like herself. The clock is ticking, Agent Chun said quietly. The new caliphate has given governments 72 hours to meet their demands, or they'll begin executing one hostage every 6 hours. That was 18 hours ago. Elena did the math quickly. 54 hours remaining, with executions beginning. If no progress was made toward meeting the terrorist demands, the governments involved couldn't and wouldn't release 50 imprisoned terrorists, which meant the hostages would begin dying unless someone intervened. What's the operational plan? Elena asked, surprised to hear herself engaging with the details. Hayes seemed to recognize the significance of her question. By asking about operational details, Elena was implicitly acknowledging that she was considering the mission. Insertion would be by sea, he explained. A submarine would take you to within 10 miles of the Somali coast. From there, you'd travel overland to the shooting position we've identified. A spotter would accompany you to handle communications and target identification and extraction. The same route, assuming the mission succeeds. If it fails, quotes Hayes, shrugged. You understand the risks. Elena did understand. If the mission failed, if she was captured or killed, Elena Vasquez would simply disappear. There would be no official acknowledgement, no rescue attempts, no repatriation of remains. It was the bargain that came with operating in the shadows. I need time to think about it, Elena said. I'm afraid time is something we don't have much of, Agent Chun replied. The submarine leaves from Norfolk in 18 hours. If you're going to do this, we need to move immediately. Elena looked out the diner window at her pickup truck, thinking about the life she'd built as Elena Vasquez. The small apartment in Billings where she'd learned to sleep without nightmares. The job at the sporting goods store where she'd discovered she enjoyed helping weekend hunters find the right equipment. The slowly growing circle of friends who knew her as a quiet, somewhat mysterious woman who was surprisingly good with a rifle. It was a simple life, but it was hers. She'd earned it through 3 years of careful construction and deliberate normalcy. And now these people were asking her to risk it all for a mission that might succeed or might result in her death in a Somali desert. What guarantee do I have that this is really about rescuing hostages? Elena asked. How do I know this isn't about eliminating someone inconvenient under the cover of a rescue operation? Hayes and Agent Chun exchanged a look that Elena found reassuring in its openness. They had clearly expected this question. You don't, Hayes admitted, but you can research the situation yourself. The compound was indeed captured, the hostages are real, and Sergeant Williams was indeed executed. The intelligence we're showing. You can be verified through open sources. Agent Chun added, more importantly, you know the type of people we're asking you to help. Military personnel, intelligence operatives, people who volunteered for dangerous assignments to protect others. People like yourself. It was a sophisticated appeal, designed to leverage Elena's military identity and sense of duty. But it was also, she suspected, genuine. The mission profile fit the pattern of legitimate hostage rescue operations, and the time pressure was consistent with the kind of ultimatum terrorist organizations typically issued. "If I agree to this," Elena said carefully, "what happens afterward? Do I go back to being Elena Vasquez, or do you keep finding new missions for Captain Morrison?" "That would be up to you," Hayes said. "We're not in the business of forcing retired assets back into service. But we would be available if you ever decided that Elena Vasquez's life wasn't fulfilling enough." The implication was clear. They would honor her choice to remain retired, but the door would always be open for future missions. It was both a promise and a subtle threat. They knew where to find her if circumstances required it. Elena looked at the tablet again, studying the satellite imagery of the compound. Somewhere in that maze of buildings and guard towers, 16 people were waiting for help that might never come. Military personnel who had volunteered for dangerous service, just as she had. People who deserved better than being abandoned to terrorist executioners. "I'll need to see the complete intelligence package," Elena said finally. "Weather data, guard rotations, communications intercepts, everything you have." Hayes smiled, but it was the controlled expression of a professional rather than genuine warmth. "Does that mean you're accepting the mission?" "It means I'm considering it. But I won't commit to anything until I understand exactly what's being asked of me." Agent Chun touched the tablet screen, bringing up a new set of files. "Everything we have is here. You can review it during the flight to Norfolk." "Flight?" "There's a private jet waiting at the Billings airport," Has explained. "We took the liberty of making arrangements, assuming you might be willing to at least look at the mission parameters." Elena felt a familiar mixture of admiration and annoyance at the presumption. These people had been planning around her decision before she'd even made it, which suggested either supreme confidence or careful psychological profiling. "Probably both. What about my life here?" Elena asked. "My job, my apartment, my truck? Already handled," Agent Chun said. "Elena Vasquez is going on an extended hunting trip in Alaska. Her employer has been notified. Her rent is paid through next month, and her truck will be safely stored." The efficiency was both impressive and troubling. They had been preparing for this moment, constructing the framework for her disappearance even before approaching her. It suggested they knew her well enough to predict her likely response. "And if I decide not to take the mission after reviewing the intelligence?" "Then Elena Vasquez returns from her hunting trip with some good stories and maybe a nice trophy," Hayes said. "No harm done." Elena doubted it would be that simple, but she also recognized that she'd already passed the point of no return. By engaging with the mission parameters, by asking operational questions, she demonstrated enough interest that Hayes and Chun would consider her a viable asset. Walking away completely might prove more difficult than they were suggesting. "All right," Elena said, standing from the booth. "Let's go look at your intelligence package." The private jet was a small but luxurious aircraft, the kind that wealthy executives used for business travel. Elena settled into a leather seat and accepted a cup of coffee from the flight attendant while Hayes and Chun arranged files on the conference table. As the plane climbed into the Montana sky, Elena found herself looking down at the landscape where she'd spent the last 3 years building a new life. The shooting range where she'd won her first competition was invisible from this altitude, but she knew it was down there somewhere, along with the small apartment and modest life she might never see again. The compound was originally built by the Somali government in the 1980s as a regional administrative center. Agent Chun began spreading out detailed architectural drawings. When the central government collapsed, it was abandoned for nearly 2 decades before being renovated by the Joint Task Force. Elena studied the layouts, noting the defensive modifications that had been added over the years. The original structure had been designed for administration, not combat, but the military occupants had clearly reinforced key positions and created overlapping fields of fire. The new caliphate captured it during a coordinated night assault 3 weeks ago, Hayes continued. Intelligence suggests they had inside information about security procedures and guard rotations. Inside information from whom? Unknown. Could be a compromised local national employee. Could be signals intelligence intercepts. Could be simple observation over time. The investigation is ongoing, Elena made a mental note. If the terrorists had inside information, they might know more about military procedures and capabilities than typical insurgent groups. That would make them more dangerous and less predictable. The hostage-holding area was a converted conference room in the center of the compound, originally designed to be secure from external observation. The terrorists had reinforced it further, adding additional locks and posting guards at all access points. Guard rotation happens every 4 hours, Agent Chun explained, pointing to surveillance photos taken with high-powered telephoto lenses. But they maintain constant overwatch from these 3 positions. The overwatch positions were the key to the entire operation. Each was manned by experienced fighters with automatic weapons and radio communications. Any rescue attempt would have to neutralize these positions simultaneously, or the guards would have time to alert the hostage guards and potentially begin executing prisoners. 800 meters is a long shot for multiple targets, Elena observed. What's the time window between the first and last target? Based on our analysis of their communication procedures, you'd have approximately 45 seconds before they could effectively coordinate a response, Hayes said. 3 targets, 45 seconds, 800 meters in potentially adverse weather conditions. Elena ran the calculations in her head. 3 shots in 45 seconds was achievable for someone with her skills, but it would require perfect execution. No time for second shots, no margin for error. Each bullet would have to find its target on the first attempt. What about the spotter you mentioned? Agent Chun touched the tablet screen, bringing up a personnel file. Sergeant First, Class Maria Santos, Army Special Forces. She's been deployed to Somalia twice and speaks fluent Arabic and Somali. More importantly, she's worked with military snipers before and understands the operational requirements. Elena studied Santos's photograph and service record. 29 years old, 8 years of military service, decorations for valor in combat. The kind of professional soldier Elena had worked with countless times during her military career. Does she know who I am? She knows she'd be working with a civilian contractor with specialized skills, Hayes said. She doesn't need to know. More than that. Elena understood the operational security requirements, but she also knew that effective sniper-spotter teams required trust and communication that went beyond simple professionalism. Santos would have to trust Elena's abilities completely, and Elena would have to trust Santos to provide accurate range and wind information under combat conditions. What's the weather forecast for the target area? Agent Chun brought up meteorological data for the next 72 hours. Temperature ranging from 95 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds from the northeast at 5 to 15 miles per hour, with occasional gusts up to 25. Humidity around 30%. No precipitation expected. The conditions were challenging but manageable. The heat would create significant mirage effects that could throw off long-range shots, but Elena had trained in similar environments. The wind patterns were within acceptable parameters for precision shooting, assuming they remained relatively stable. What about the rescue team? A joint task force drawn from Special Operations Command, Hayes explained. They'll be positioned here, approximately 2 miles from the compound, ready to move when the overwatch positions are neutralized. Elena studied the approach routes the rescue team would use. It was a sound plan, but it depended entirely on her ability to eliminate the 3 overwatch positions before they could alert the rest of the compound. If she missed even one target, or if her timing was off, the rescue team would be advancing into a fully alerted enemy position with minimal cover. What's the backup plan if the sniper mission fails? Hayes and Chun exchanged another look, and Elena recognized the expression immediately. There was no backup plan. If she failed, the rescue team would have to attempt a direct assault against alert defenders, which would almost certainly result in heavy casualties on both sides and the likely execution of all hostages. "I see," Elena said quietly. The weight of responsibility was familiar but still daunting. 16 lives depended on her ability to make 3 perfect shots under combat conditions from 800 meters away. There would be no second chances, no opportunity to adjust and try again. Success or failure would be determined in the space of 45 seconds. "There's one more thing," Agent Chun said, her voice carrying a note of reluctance. "The terrorist leadership includes someone you might recognize." She touched the tablet screen, bringing up a surveillance photograph of a bearded man in military-style clothing. Elena felt her blood turn cold as she recognized the face. "Colonel Rashid Al-Mansouri," she said quietly. "You know him?" Elena knew him very well. 3 years ago in Syria, she'd been tasked with eliminating Al-Mansouri during a joint operation that had gone spectacularly wrong. She'd had him in her sights, had been about to take the shot when the I'd explosion that supposedly killed Captain Alexandra Morrison had destroyed her position and allowed Al-Mansouri to escape. "He was a target in Syria," Elena said carefully. "The mission was unsuccessful. According to our intelligence, Al-Mansouri is the operational commander of the new Caliphate forces holding the compound," Hayes said. "He'll be one of your 3 targets." The personal dimension added complexity to an already difficult mission. Al-Mansouri was smart, experienced, and paranoid. He would have learned from their previous encounter, would be taking extra precautions against sniper attacks. He might even recognize signs of Elena's presence and tactics. "Does he know Captain Morrison survived the Syria operation?" "Unknown," Agent Chun admitted. "But we have to assume he's aware that someone escaped the IED blast. Whether he knows specifically about you is unclear." Elena closed the intelligence files and leaned back in her seat. The mission was complex, dangerous, and personal in ways that made professional detachment difficult. But it was also exactly the kind of challenge that Captain Alexandra Morrison had been trained for, the kind of mission that could make a real difference in the fight against terrorism. The plane was beginning its descent toward Norfolk, and Elena could see lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere ahead lay a submarine that would carry her across the Atlantic toward a confrontation with both her past and her future. "I'll take the mission," Elena said finally. Hez nodded, as if he'd never doubted her decision. "Welcome back to active duty, Captain Morrison." But Elena shook her head. "Elena Vasquez is taking this mission. Captain Morrison is still dead, and she's going to stay that way." The USS Michigan was a converted Ohio-class submarine originally designed to carry nuclear missiles but reconfigured for special operations. Elena descended through the forward escape trunk, her gear secured in waterproof containers, breathing recycled air that carried the distinctive metallic taste of submarine atmosphere. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos was waiting in the mission planning compartment, studying satellite imagery on a laptop computer. She looked up as Elena entered, her dark eyes quickly assessing the woman who would be her sniper for the next 72 hours. "You must be our specialist," Santos said, standing to offer a handshake. "I'm Maria Santos, but you can call me Ghost. That's been my call sign for the last 5 years." Elena shook her hand, noting the firm grip and calloused palms that spoke of extensive weapons training. "Elena, and thanks for the call sign intel. I prefer to keep things simple." "Elena." "Works for me," Santos said with a slight smile. Simple is good in this business. The mission compartment was cramped but efficiently organized, with maps, communications equipment, and weapons laid out in precise order. Elena recognized the professionalism immediately. Santos was the kind of soldier who left nothing to chance. I've been studying the target area for the past 6 hours, Santos said, gesturing to the laptop screen. The good news is that the shooting position we've identified has excellent visibility to all 3 overwatch points. The bad news is that it's completely exposed to counter-sniper fire once we start shooting. Elena studied the terrain analysis, noting the elevation changes and potential concealment options. The shooting position was on a low ridge approximately 800 meters from the compound, offering clear sight lines but minimal cover from return fire. How long do we have to get out after the shooting starts? Approximately 3 minutes. Before they can organize an effective response, Santos replied. But that assumes everything goes according to plan. If there are more guards than we've identified, or if they have heavy weapons positioned outside our intelligence picture, we could be in trouble much faster. Elena appreciated Santos's directness. Too many spotters tried to sugarcoat the dangers, which led to poor decision-making under pressure. Ghost was clearly someone who understood that accurate information was more valuable than false reassurance. What about extraction? Santos brought up a different map, showing the route from the shooting position back to the coast. 2 miles overland to the beach, then a small boat to the submarine. The terrain favors us lots of broken ground and vegetation for concealment. But we'll be carrying full gear and moving fast, so conditioning is going to matter. Elena nodded. Military operations always came down to simple fundamentals: accurate shooting, physical fitness, and the ability to make good decisions under extreme stress. Everything else was just details. Commander Sarah Mitchell, the submarine's captain, entered the compartment carrying the cup of coffee and a clipboard full of operational orders. She was in her early 40s, with the steady demeanor of someone who'd spent years managing complex operations in dangerous environments. "How are our passengers settling in?" Mitchell asked. "Getting oriented," Santos replied. Elena was just reviewing the extraction route. Mitchell studied Elena with the careful attention of someone responsible for everyone aboard her vessel. "I understand you have specialized skills that are critical to this mission's success." "I can handle my part," Elena said simply. "I'm sure you can. But I want you to understand that once we reach the insertion point, this submarine becomes your lifeline. Will be positioned exactly where we're supposed to be when you need extraction. But if you miss your window, we can't wait around indefinitely." Elena understood. Submarines were valuable strategic assets, not just transportation for special operations. Mitchell would risk her vessel and crew to support the mission, but she wouldn't sacrifice them for delayed or compromised operators. "How long is our window?" 4 hours from insertion to extraction, Mitchell replied. "If you're not at the pickup point by then, we have to assume the mission has failed and you've been captured or killed." 4 hours to travel 2 miles overland. Establish a shooting position. Wait for the optimal moment. Engage 3 targets in rapid succession, and then travel 2 miles back to the coast. It was a tight timeline, but achievable if everything went according to plan. "What's the communications protocol?" Elena asked. Santos opened a waterproof case containing radio equipment. "Short-range tactical radios for communication between us, satellite radio for emergency contact with mission command. But once the shooting starts, we're essentially on our own until extraction." Elena examined the rifles that had been prepared for the mission. 2 identical weapons, both built around the same precision platform she'd used in competition, but configured for military operations. The barrels were slightly longer, the stocks adjustable for different shooting positions, and the scopes were military-grade optics with additional features for range estimation and wind calculation. "These are beautiful weapons," Elena said, running her hands along the rifle's action. Who built them? Special Operations Command has a custom weapons shop, Santos explained. They built these specifically for long-range operations in desert environments. The barrels are match-grade steel, hand-lapped for consistency. The triggers are set to exactly 2 pounds, and the scopes are zeroed for your specific ammunition at 800 meters. Elena was impressed by the attention to detail. Someone had clearly invested significant resources in ensuring she had the best possible equipment for the mission. It suggested that the hostage rescue operation was considered extremely important by whoever was ultimately responsible for authorizing it. What ammunition are we using? Santos handed her a box of cartridges. Custom loads, 175-grain Sierra Match King bullets. These specific rounds were tested at 800 meters in conditions similar to what we expect in Somalia. The ballistic data is loaded into your scope's computer. Elena examined one of the cartridges, noting the precise manufacturing and consistent weight. Military snipers had access to ammunition that was manufactured to tolerances impossible to achieve in commercial production. Each round was essentially identical to every other round, eliminating one source of variation that could affect accuracy. How much time do we have to confirm zero? Elena asked. The submarine has an underwater firing range, Mitchell said. It's only 50 meters, but it'll let you verify that your scope adjustments are correct and get familiar with the trigger. Underwater firing range was an unexpected luxury, but Elena recognized its value. Even small changes in a rifle's zero could result in significant misses at 800 meters. Being able to test the weapon before the mission was a significant advantage. The next several hours passed in careful preparation. Elena familiarized herself with every aspect of the equipment, from the radio protocols to the emergency medical supplies. Santos briefed her on Somali geography, cultural considerations, and the specific tactical challenges of operating in the Horn of Africa. The heat is going to be brutal, Santos warned. During the day, temperatures can reach 120 degrees in direct sunlight. Dehydration becomes a serious concern. Within hours, and heat exhaustion can compromise judgment and physical performance. Elena had operated in similar environments before, but it had been 3 years since her last deployment to a desert climate. Her body would need time to readjust to the extreme conditions, time they didn't have. What about local threats? Military units, police, civilian populations? The area around the compound is essentially lawless, Santos explained. The central government has no effective control, and local clan militias are primarily concerned with protecting their own territory. As long as we avoid populated areas and don't interfere with local business interests, we should be able to move without attracting attention. Elena appreciated the qualified optimism. Somalia was notoriously unpredictable, with shifting alliances and multiple armed factions operating in overlapping territories. What looked safe one day could become a battlefield the next, often without warning. Commander Mitchell's voice came over the submarine's public address system. Now hear this. All hands, prepare for dive. Repeat, prepare for dive. Elena felt the subtle change in motion as the submarine descended beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. They were committed now, traveling underwater toward a confrontation that would determine whether 16 military personnel lived or died. Nervous? Santos asked, noting Elena's expression. Focused, Elena replied. It's been a while since I've done anything like this. Military experience? Elena considered how much to reveal. Santos would need to trust her completely during the mission, but operational security required limiting information sharing to co-family. Essential details only. Some, Elena said finally. Enough to know what we're getting into. Santos nodded, apparently satisfied with the limited disclosure. Professional soldiers understood that everyone had secrets, and the specific details of past operations were often classified beyond the level that would allow casual discussion. "Well, whatever your background, I'm glad you're here," Santos said. "I've read the intelligence reports on this compound. Trying to extract those hostages without neutralizing the Overwatch positions first would be suicide for the rescue team." Elena understood the pressure. The entire operation depended on her ability to make 3 perfect shots in rapid succession. If she failed, if her marksmanship wasn't sufficient for the challenge, 16 hostages would likely die along with an unknown number of rescue team members. "Tell me about the rescue team," Elena said. "Who are we supporting?" Santos brought up personnel files on her laptop. "Joint Task Force, like Hayes mentioned. Team leader is Major David Kim, Army Special Forces. 20 years of experience, including multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. The rest of the team is drawn from various special operations units: SEALs, Rangers, Special Forces, Delta Force." Elena studied the photographs and service records. All experienced professionals. All volunteers for high-risk operations. The kind of people who understood that military service sometimes required accepting missions where success was uncertain and failure meant death. They know the timeline. They know that when they get the signal to move, they'll have approximately 3 minutes to reach the hostage building before organized resistance can form, Santos replied. After that, it becomes a straight-up firefight with unknown odds. 3 minutes to cover 2 miles of broken terrain, breach a reinforced building, neutralize guards, and extract 16 hostages. It was possible, but only if Elena eliminated the Overwatch positions exactly as planned. Elena spent the next 2 hours reviewing target profiles, studying satellite imagery, and assessing the operational requirements for each potential mission. The individuals on the target list were responsible for hundreds of civilian deaths, dozens of terrorist attacks, and ongoing threats to American interests worldwide. "These are all legitimate military targets," Elena observed, studying the file on a Syrian bomb maker named Hassan al-Rashid. "But they're in locations where conventional operations would be impossible." "Exactly," Colonel Patterson confirmed. Al-Rashid, for example, operates from a compound in Damascus that's heavily protected by Syrian government forces. Any official military action would be considered an act of war. Elena understood the political complexities that made her skills valuable. A single sniper operating without official sanction could eliminate targets that would be impossible to reach through conventional military channels. "What's the operational timeline?" Hayes consulted his documents. "Flexible, based on intelligence opportunities and target availability. Some of these individuals move frequently. Others maintain predictable routines. Operations would be planned around windows of opportunity." Elena noticed something interesting about the target list. Several of these people are connected to Al-Mansouri's network. This isn't just counter-terrorism, it's systematic dismantling of his organization. Al-Mansouri spent years building a sophisticated terrorist network with cells across multiple countries. Agent Chun explained. His death created a power vacuum, but it also created opportunities to eliminate his key lieutenants before they can reorganize. Elena realized that the Somalia mission had been more successful than she'd initially understood. By killing Al-Mansouri, she disrupted a major terrorist organization and created intelligence opportunities that could be exploited over months or years. "What about the rules of engagement?" Elena asked. Colonel Patterson handed her a classified document outlining operational parameters, strict guidelines for target identification, collateral damage limitations, and operational security. "These aren't assassination missions, they're surgical elimination of specific threats." Elena read through the rules carefully, noting the emphasis on precision and discrimination. She would be authorized to eliminate specific individuals, but only under circumstances that minimized risk to innocent civilians. I want to modify the contractor agreement, Elena said after reviewing all the documents. Hayes looked up with interest. What kind of modifications? I want the right to refuse missions that don't meet my personal ethical standards. And I want the right to terminate the agreement if I believe the program is being used for purposes beyond legitimate counterterrorism. That's unusual, Hayes said. Most contractors don't negotiate moral clauses. Most contractors don't have my skill set, Elena replied. And most contractors haven't spent 3 years learning to live with the consequences of their actions. Elena was thinking about the 3 years she'd spent as Elena Vasquez, the simple life that had taught her the value of normal human relationships and civilian concerns. That experience had given her perspective on the moral weight of her military skills. I'll need to consult with legal counsel, Hayes said. But I think we can accommodate those requirements. As the negotiations continued, Elena found herself thinking about the people she'd left behind in Montana. Marcus Chun would be wondering why she'd disappeared without explanation. Rebecca Torres would be concerned about her sudden absence from shooting competitions. Mike Patterson would need to find a replacement employee. All of them would remember Elena Vasquez, someone who'd vanished mysteriously, leaving behind unanswered questions and abandoned relationships. But Elena realized that was probably the best possible outcome. Better to be remembered as a mystery than to have her true identity discovered and put those people at risk. There's one more thing, Elena said as the meeting concluded. I want to establish a memorial fund for Sergeant David Williams, the SAS soldier who was executed by the new caliphate. Something that supports families of special operations personnel killed in action. Hayes looked surprised by the request. That's not typically part of contractor agreements. It's part of mine, Elena said firmly. Williams died because he volunteered for dangerous service. His family shouldn't suffer financially because of his sacrifice. Elena was thinking about the human cost of the operations she would be conducting. Every mission would involve life and death decisions, and she wanted to honor the people who'd made similar sacrifices in service of their countries. I'll make sure that's included, Hayes agreed. The training facility was located in North Carolina, a sprawling complex hidden in mountains where government agencies prepared personnel for classified operations. Elena spent 2 weeks there, refreshing skills that had atrophied during her civilian years and learning new techniques for the missions ahead. The weapons training was extensive. Elena worked with multiple rifle systems, different ammunition types, and various optical systems designed for specific operational environments. She practiced shots at distances ranging from 200 to 1,500 meters, in conditions ranging from desert heat to mountain cold. Your muscle memory is still excellent, observed Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the chief instructor for the sniper training program. 3 years out of practice, but your fundamentals are solid. Elena was pleased to discover that her competitive shooting had actually improved some aspects of her military marksmanship. The precision required for tournament shooting had made her more consistent at moderate ranges, while maintaining the might thing that Tuiveni mean shooting had made her more consistent at moderate ranges. Extreme distance capabilities from her military training. The physical conditioning was more challenging. 3 years of civilian life had left Elena in good general fitness, but lacking the specific conditioning required for military operations. She spent hours each day rebuilding the endurance and strength needed for extended missions in harsh environments. Your cardio is actually better than most military snipers, noted the fitness instructor. The competitive shooting circuit must have required more physical activity than typical military training. Elena realized that the active lifestyle of shooting competitions, traveling to different ranges, carrying equipment, maintaining focus for extended periods, had provided better overall conditioning than she'd expected. The most challenging aspect of retraining was psychological. Elena had to relearn how to compartmentalize civilian concerns and focus exclusively on mission objectives. The empathy and emotional connection she'd developed during her years as Elena Vasquez could be a liability in combat situations. "You're thinking too much about collateral damage," observed Dr. Patricia Morrison, no relation, the staff psychologist. "That's admirable from a moral standpoint, but it can create hesitation that gets people killed." Elena understood the concern. Military snipers needed to make split-second decisions about when to shoot and when to hold fire. Excessive concern about unintended consequences could lead to missed opportunities or compromised missions. "How do I balance moral responsibility with operational effectiveness?" Elena asked. "By trusting your training and following established rules of engagement," Dr. Morrison replied. "The ethical guidelines are built into the operational procedures. Your job is to execute those procedures perfectly, not to second-guess the policy decisions that created them." Elena spent considerable time studying the intelligence files for her first assigned target, Dr. Mahmoud Hassan, a chemical weapons expert who'd been developing poison gas for terrorist organizations. Hassan was responsible for chemical attacks that had killed dozens of civilians in Syria and Iraq. Hassan's routine was predictable. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he traveled from his protected compound in Damascus to a university laboratory where he conducted research. The route included a section where his convoy was vulnerable to long-range observation from a hillside position approximately 900 meters away. "The shot is technically challenging but achievable," Elena told her mission planner during their final briefing. "Hassan's vehicle has armored glass, but the side windows have a vulnerability at the edge where the ballistic protection overlaps." "What about collateral damage?" Elena studied the route analysis carefully. "Hassan travels with bodyguards, but they're legitimate military targets since they're protecting a terrorist asset. The convoy route passes through an industrial area, with minimal civilian presence during the planned time window." Elena was satisfied that the mission met her ethical standards. Hassan was undoubtedly a legitimate target. His elimination would prevent future chemical weapons attacks, and the operational plan minimized risk to innocent people. "Insertion will be by commercial aircraft to Beirut, then over land infiltration through the Lebanese border," her handler explained. "You'll have 48 hours to establish position and wait for the optimal engagement opportunity." Elena reviewed the extraction plan, noting the multiple contingencies and backup routes. Professional mission planning always included extensive preparations for things going wrong. "What's the intelligence confidence level on Hassan's schedule?" "Hi, we've been monitoring his routine for 6 months, and he's maintained the same pattern consistently. Tuesday and Thursday trips, departure. Time between 0800 and 0830, same route each time." Elena appreciated thorough intelligence preparation. Uncertainty was the enemy of successful sniper operations, and the more precisely she could predict target location and timing, the higher her probability of success. The flight to Beirut was routine, Elena traveling under the identity of Sarah Mitchell, a photojournalist covering Middle Eastern political developments. Her equipment was concealed in camera cases and photographic gear, designed to pass casual inspection while providing everything needed for the mission. Elena's handler in Beirut was a Lebanese-American CIA officer named David Halil, who'd been working in the region for over a decade. He provided local transportation, safe house access, and real-time intelligence updates. "Hassan's been maintaining his routine," Halil reported during their initial meeting. "But there's been increased security around his compound. Someone may have leaked information about potential threats." Elena considered the implications. Increased security could mean more bodyguards, route changes, or enhanced protective measures that might complicate the mission. What kind of increased security? Additional checkpoints on his usual route, more bodyguards in his convoy, and what appears to be counter-sniper teams positioned at key points along the way. Elena felt a familiar chill. Counter-sniper team suggested that someone knew a sniper. Attack was being planned, which implied either operational security failure or betrayal within the intelligence community. Could be routine security enhancement, Halil suggested. Hassan knows he's a target. He might have upgraded his protection independently. Elena hoped that was the case, but her instinct suggested something more troubling. The timing was too coincidental, coming just as she'd been assigned to eliminate Hassan. I want to conduct personal reconnaissance before committing to the mission, Elena decided. Halil provided civilian clothes and a rental car, allowing Elena to drive the route Hassan would use and assess the security situation firsthand. What she discovered confirmed her concerns that the counter-sniper positions were professionally prepared, with excellent sight lines covering the hillside location she'd planned to use. More significantly, the teams appeared to be using high-end equipment and coordinated communication, not the improvised security that Hassan might arrange independently. Elena realized that someone with detailed knowledge of her operational plan had provided Hassan's security team with specific information about the planned attack. The mission had been compromised before it began. Elena called for extraction, returning to the safe house where Halil was monitoring intelligence communications. "The mission's blown," she told him. "Hassan's security knows exactly where and when we plan to attack." Halil's expression grew grim. "That means we have a leak somewhere in the operational chain." Elena understood the implications. If someone within the U.S. intelligence community was providing information to terrorist targets, then every future mission could be compromised. More immediately, it meant that Elena's location and activities might be known to hostile forces. "We need to leave Beirut immediately," Elena said. "If they know about the Hassan mission, they might know about our extraction plan too." Elena's assessment proved correct. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Halil received reports of increased terrorist activity in the areas around their planned extraction routes. Someone was positioning assets to intercept them. "There's a backup extraction point," Halil said, studying his operational maps. "But it means traveling through areas controlled by Hezbollah." Elena preferred taking her chances with Hezbollah to remaining in an area where terrorist cells were actively hunting her. At least Hezbollah was a known quantity with predictable motivations. The journey to the backup extraction point took them through the mountains of eastern Lebanon, following back roads that were barely more than goat trails. Elena drove while Halil monitored radio communications, listening for indications that their route had been discovered. "There's something you should know," Halil said as they climbed through a particularly treacherous mountain pass. "The leak in our intelligence chain, we think we know who it is." Elena felt her stomach drop. "Who?" "Agent Chun, the woman who recruited you for the Somalia mission." Elena's mind raced through the implications. Chun had been present for every major briefing, had access to all operational details, and had been involved in planning Elena's transition to contractor status. How long has she been compromised? Unknown. But intelligence analysis suggests she may have been feeding information to terrorist networks for months, possibly years. Elena realized that her entire relationship with the intelligence community had been built on betrayal. Chun had recruited her for the Somalia mission while simultaneously providing information that allowed terrorists to prepare for exactly that type of attack. "The hostage rescue mission," Elena said, understanding flooding through her. Chun knew it was going to fail because she'd warned them it was coming. "That's our working theory," Halil confirmed. "But we needed to be sure before taking action." Elena understood now why the Hassan mission had been planned so carefully, with such detailed intelligence preparation. It hadn't been intended to succeed. It had been designed to confirm Chun's betrayal and provide evidence for her prosecution. "I was bait," Elena said. "You were the proof we needed," Halil corrected. "And now that we have it, we can clean up the intelligence leak and proceed with legitimate operations. Elena felt a mixture of anger and relief. Anger at being manipulated and used as an unwitting test case. Relief that the people she'd been working with were finally addressing the security problems that had been undermining their operations. Backup extraction point was a small airfield in the Bekaa Valley, where a private aircraft was waiting to take Elena back to the United States. As the plane lifted off from Lebanese soil, Elena found herself thinking about the complex game of intelligence and counterintelligence that had shaped her recent experiences. Elena Vasquez had been a simple identity designed to provide cover for a retired military operative. But that identity had been discovered, compromised, and ultimately destroyed by forces that had been operating within the intelligence community itself. Captain Alexandra Morrison was emerging from that destruction as someone new, not the government asset she'd been during her military career, but not the civilian she'd tried to become either. Something between those extremes, someone who could operate independently while serving larger purposes. As the aircraft flew through the night sky toward an uncertain future, Elena realized that her real life was just beginning. 6 months later, Elena stood on a hillside in northern Syria, her rifle trained on a compound 800 meters away where Hassan al-Rashid was meeting with senior leaders of the terrorist organization that had emerged from Al-Mansouri's network. The intelligence for this operation was solid, verified through multiple sources and cross-checked against communications intercepts. Agent Chun was in federal prison, her network of contacts identified and neutralized. The security leaks that had compromised previous operations had been sealed. Elena's breathing was steady, her heart rate controlled, her mind focused on the simple mechanical relationship between her finger and the trigger. Through her scope, she could see Hassan clearly as he gestured to his companions, discussing plans that would never be implemented. Range 847 meters, wind from the northwest at 7 miles per hour, reported Maria Santos, who had volunteered to serve as Elena's spotter for this operation. They had developed an effective partnership during training, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to precision. Elena made final adjustments to her scope, compensating for the environmental conditions and the slight upward angle of the shot. Hassan was standing near a window, clearly visible, presenting a perfect target. But Elena waited. Not because she was hesitant or uncertain, but because she was watching for the optimal moment when Hassan would be isolated from his companions, minimizing any risk of collateral damage. The moment came when Hassan stepped outside to take a phone call, standing alone on a balcony overlooking the compound courtyard. Elena's crosshairs settled on center mass. Her breathing cycle reached its natural pause, and her finger completed its smooth, steady pressure on the trigger. The shot broke cleanly, and through her scope, Elena watched Hassan collapse to the balcony floor. 847 meters away, a man responsible for dozens of terrorist attacks had been eliminated with surgical precision. "Target down," Elena reported calmly. "Moving to extraction." Elena and Santos packed their equipment and began the 2-mile journey to their extraction point, moving through the Syrian countryside with the confidence of professionals who had planned every aspect of their operation. As they walked through the darkness, Elena found herself thinking about the path that had brought her to this moment. From the shooting competition in Montana, where she'd been called Lucky Shot, through the complex deceptions and betrayals that had destroyed her civilian identity, to this hillside in Syria where she'd eliminated another terrorist leader, Elena realized that luck had never been part of the equation. Her success came from training, preparation, careful planning, and a willingness to make difficult decisions under extreme pressure. The Lucky Shot nickname had been a misunderstanding of what real precision shooting required. Captain Alexandra Morrison had never been dead, despite what official records claimed. She had been dormant, hidden beneath the carefully constructed identity of Elena Vasquez. waiting for circumstances that would require her unique skills. Now those skills were being used again, but on Elena's terms, in service of objectives she had chosen and accepted. It was a form of freedom that she hadn't experienced during her military career, when orders came from superior officers and missions were defined by others. "You know," Santos said as they reached their extraction point, "when I first heard we were working with a civilian contractor, I wasn't sure what to expect." Elena smiled in the darkness. "And what do you think now?" "I think Captain Morrison never really retired," Santos replied. "She just took a temporary assignment as Elena Vasquez." Elena considered the observation as their extraction helicopter appeared in the distance, its navigation lights visible against the star-filled Syrian sky. Santos was probably right. Elena Vasquez had been a role she'd played rather than a person she'd become. But playing that role had taught her important lessons about the value of normal human relationships, the satisfaction of simple accomplishments, and the peace that came from living without constant awareness of danger and violence. Captain Morrison would carry those lessons forward into whatever came next, using them to maintain perspective and moral grounding as she continued to operate in the shadow world between official military service and civilian life. As the helicopter landed and Elena climbed aboard for the journey home, she realized that her story was far from over. There were 16 more names on her target list, 16 more operations that would test her skills and her judgment, but Elena was ready for whatever challenges awaited. She had survived the destruction of one identity and the resurrection of another. She had learned to balance military efficiency with civilian morality, and she had proven to herself and others that her capabilities were genuine rather than lucky. Woman they had called Lucky Shot was gone forever, but Captain Alexandra Morrison was very much alive, and she was just getting started. Elena watched the Syrian landscape pass below as the helicopter carried her toward the next chapter of her life. There would be more missions, more difficult shots, more moments when everything depended on her ability to place a bullet exactly where it needed to go. But there would also be quiet moments between operations, opportunities to remember the lessons Elena Vasquez had taught her about the value of simple human connections and the importance of fighting for something larger than herself. Elena realized that she had found a way to honor both parts of her identity, the deadly precision of Captain Morrison and the humanity of Elena Vasquez. It was a balance that would define the rest of her life, allowing her to serve her country while maintaining her soul. As the helicopter disappeared into the night sky, carrying Elena toward whatever came next, she understood that her real journey was just beginning. The shooting competition in Montana had been the end of one life and the beginning of another, but it hadn't been an ending at all. It had been a transformation, and Elena was ready to see where that transformation would lead. What an absolutely incredible journey we've shared together. A full 50,000 words of adventure, character growth, and storytelling. Creating a story of this magnitude requires months of planning, writing, and careful narration to ensure every detail is perfect and every moment keeps you engaged. This has been the equivalent of a complete novella, crafted specifically for this format. If this epic story moved you, inspired you, or simply entertained you through this incredible journey, please show your appreciation by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more amazing long-form stories. Share this with anyone who loves compelling narratives and has the patience for truly epic storytelling. Hit that notification bell to be the first to hear our newest content. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community and for joining me on this remarkable adventure. I'll see you in the next incredible tale. The next several hours in the submarine's underwater firing range, confirming her rifle's zero and familiarizing herself with the weapon's characteristics. The rifle shot smoothly with minimal recoil and excellent accuracy. At 50 meters underwater, she was able to place all 5 shots within a circle smaller than a quarter, but 50 meters Underwater was very different from 800 meters in the Somali desert. Mirage effects, wind variation, heat, and stress would all affect her accuracy. The only way to know for certain whether she could make the shots was to try them under actual mission conditions. As the submarine continued its underwater journey toward the African coast, Elena found herself thinking about the path that had led her from the shooting range in Montana to a military submarine in the Atlantic Ocean. 3 years ago, she'd believed that part of her life was over, that Captain Alexandra Morrison could remain buried beneath the carefully constructed identity of Elena Vasquez. But skills like hers, experiences like hers, created permanent obligations. There would always be situations where governments needed someone who could kill with precision from extreme distances, someone who didn't officially exist and could be disavowed if operations went wrong. Elena realized she'd been naive to think she could escape completely. The shooting competition had been a mistake, a moment of pride that had revealed capabilities she should have kept hidden. Now she was trapped between two worlds, the simple life of Elena Vasquez and the deadly efficiency of Captain Alexandra Morrison. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," Santos observed. Elena managed a smile. "Just thinking about shot placement and wind compensation. That's good," Santos said. "But don't overthink it. When the moment comes, trust your training and instincts. Hesitation kills more operations than enemy action." It was good advice, and Elena recognized the wisdom that came from years of combat experience. Santos was right. Technical perfection mattered, but ultimately, successful military operations came down to making good decisions quickly under extreme pressure. The submarine's intercom crackled to life. "Elena and Ghost, report to the mission compartment for final briefing." Elena gathered her gear and followed Santos through the submarine's narrow corridors. In 12 hours, they would be on the Somali coast, beginning an operation that would test every skill she'd developed during her military career. But as they walked toward the final briefing, Elena found herself thinking not about the technical challenges ahead, but about the 16 hostages whose lives depended on her accuracy. Military personnel who had volunteered for dangerous service, just as she had. People who deserved the chance to go home to their families, whatever the personal cost, whatever the risk to her carefully constructed new life. Elena was determined that those 16 people would not die in a Somali compound if she could prevent it. Captain Alexandra Morrison might be officially dead, but her skills were very much alive. The Zodiac inflatable boat cut through the dark waters of the Indian Ocean, its muffled engine barely audible above the sound of waves against the hull. Elena lay flat in the bottom of the boat, her rifle secured in a waterproof case, watching the Somali coastline grow larger in the pre-dawn darkness. Santos crouched beside the boat's operator, a Navy SEAL whose face was painted with non-reflective camouflage. They communicated in hand signals, keeping noise to an absolute minimum as they approached the landing zone. Elena checked her watch. 0347 hours local time. They had exactly 4 hours and 13 minutes until the extraction window closed. 4 hours to infiltrate 2 miles inland, establish a shooting position, engage 3 targets, and return to the coast for pickup. The boat's engine cut to idle as they approached the beach. Elena could see the landing zone, now a small cove, protected by rocky outcroppings, with dense vegetation providing concealment from the main coastal road. Intelligence had indicated the area was uninhabited, but Elena kept her sidearm ready as they prepared to go ashore. The SEAL operator guided the boat onto the sandy beach with practiced efficiency. Santos immediately stepped into the shallow water and began unloading gear while Elena secured her rifle and checked her equipment one final time. "Radio check," Santos whispered into her headset. "Lima Charlie," Elena replied, confirming clear reception on the tactical radio frequency. The SEAL operator would remain with the boat, prepared to provide immediate extraction if the mission was compromised before they reached the shooting position. He gave them a thumbs up as they gathered their gear and prepared to move inland. Elena felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with crossing from preparation into execution. Every decision from this point forward would have immediate, potentially deadly consequences. There was no more time for planning or second-guessing. Santos took point, navigating by GPS and moving with the fluid stealth of someone who'd spent years infiltrating hostile territory. Elena followed 10 meters behind, her senses hyper-alert for any indication of human presence. The terrain was exactly as described in the intelligence briefings: broken ground covered with scrub vegetation, offering good concealment, but making movement slow and physically demanding. The temperature was already approaching 90 degrees, and Elena could feel sweat beginning to soak her clothing despite the early hour. They moved in 20-minute intervals, stopping frequently to listen for sounds of human activity and check their route against satellite imagery. The compound was still over a mile away, but Elena was already running scenarios in her mind, calculating angles and distances based on the topographical information they'd studied. "Checkpoint Alpha," Santos whispered into her radio as they reached a predetermined navigation point. "Copy," Elena replied, checking her own GPS unit to confirm their position. They were making good time, but Elena was beginning to feel the effects of 3 years away from regular military conditioning. Her breathing was slightly labored, and she was sweating more than she should have been for this level of exertion. The competition shooting circuit had kept her marksmanship skills sharp but hadn't maintained the physical fitness required for extended infantry operations. As they crested a low ridge, Elena caught her first glimpse of the target compound. Even at a distance of over half a mile, she could see the defensive positions that intelligence had identified: guard towers, perimeter walls, and carefully positioned barriers designed to control approaches and create overlapping fields of fire. Santos motioned for Elena to stop while she studied the compound through high-powered binoculars. Elena used the pause to hydrate and check her equipment, but she also found herself analyzing the visual intelligence they were gathering. "I count 4 guards visible," Santos whispered. 2 in the north tower, 1 on the east wall, 1 patrolling the main gate area. Elena accepted the binoculars and conducted her own assessment. The compound looked exactly as described in the satellite imagery, but there was something about the guard positions that bothered her. The sentries seemed more alert than typical for early morning duty, and their positions suggested they were watching for specific threats rather than conducting routine security. "They're expecting something," Elena said quietly. "What makes you say that?" Elena pointed to the guard in the east wall position. "Look at his orientation. He's not watching the general area, he's focused on that specific approach route. And the patrol pattern at the main gate is wrong for routine security. They're watching for infiltration." Santos studied the compound again, and Elena saw her expression change as she recognized the significance of what Elena had observed. Guards weren't conducting routine security, they were conducting active counter-reconnaissance. "Could be coincidence," Santos said, but her voice carried doubt. "Could be," Elena agreed. "Or it could mean they know something's coming." The possibility that the mission had been compromised changed everything. If the terrorists knew about the planned rescue attempt, they might have prepared specific countermeasures: additional guards, pre-positioned sniper positions, or even the execution of hostages to deny any potential rescue. "We continue mission," Santos decided. "But we assume they're on higher alert than intelligence suggested." Elena nodded. Military operations always involved incomplete information and changing circumstances. The ability to adapt to unexpected developments was often more important than perfect initial planning. They continued toward the shooting position, moving even more carefully now that they suspected enhanced enemy vigilance. Elena found herself thinking about Colonel Al-Mansouri and wondering whether his presence had made the terrorist security more sophisticated than usual. The shooting position was exactly as described. A low ridge with clear sight lines to all 3 overwatch points in the compound. Elena began setting up her rifle while Santos established the spotting position and communications equipment. Through her scope, Elena could see the compound in perfect detail. 800 meters away, guards moved through their positions with the confidence of people who believed they were in complete control of their environment. She identified the 3 overwatch positions that would need to be neutralized: North Tower, East Wall, and South Courtyard. Range to target Alpha? Elena asked, referring to the North Tower. Santos checked his laser rangefinder. 812 meters, elevation angle -4 degrees. Elena made the first adjustment to her scope, compensating for the slight difference between the planned 800 meters and the actual distance. At extreme range, even small variations in distance could result in significant misses. Wind? 5 miles per hour from the northeast, steady. No significant variation in the last 10 minutes. Elena studied the compound through her scope, looking for additional wind indicators. Flags, vegetation movement, dust patterns. Anything that might provide information about wind conditions at the target area rather than their shooting position. She identified her 3 targets. The North Tower guard, clearly visible in his elevated position. The East Wall guard, partially concealed behind a concrete barrier. And the South Courtyard guard, who appeared and disappeared as he walked a regular patrol route. The sequence would be critical. North Tower first, because that guard had the best overview of the entire compound and would be most likely to spot muzzle flash from her rifle. East Wall second, because that position controlled the main approach route the rescue team would use. South Courtyard last, because that guard's patrol pattern meant she would have to time the shot to catch him when he was visible and stationary. Rescue team is in position, Santos reported, listening to updates on the command frequency. There, waiting for our signal. Elena settled into her final shooting position, making minute adjustments to ensure perfect stability. The rifle felt familiar and comfortable, but she was acutely aware that the next few minutes would determine whether 16 people lived or died. "Ready when you are," Santos said quietly. Elena placed her finger on the trigger and began her final target acquisition. Through the scope, she could see the North Tower guard, clearly a bearded man in military-style clothing, holding an assault rifle and scanning the area on the compound. But as Elena began her breathing cycle, preparing to take the first shot, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The guard in the North Tower was holding a radio to his mouth, apparently reporting something to his commander. "Santos," Elena whispered urgently. "North Tower guard is on the radio." Santos raised his binoculars and confirmed the observation. That could be routine communication. But Elena's instincts, honed by years of combat experience, were screaming warnings. The guard's body language suggested urgency rather than routine reporting. He was alerting someone about something specific. "We may have been spotted," Elena said. Before Santos could respond, the compound erupted into activity. Additional guards appeared from buildings Elena hadn't known were occupied. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter. And most ominously, she could see guards running toward the building where the hostages were being held. "Abort?" Santos asked, his hand moving toward the radio that would signal the rescue team to withdraw. Elena's mind raced through options. If they aborted now, the hostages would certainly be moved to a more secure location, or possibly executed immediately. If they continued, they would be engaging targets that were now fully alert and possibly prepared for exactly this type of attack. Through her scope, Elena could see guards taking positions, specifically designed to counter sniper attacks. They were moving to areas with overhead cover, using buildings and walls to mask their positions from long-range observation. But she could also see something else, a figure in the central courtyard that she recognized even at 800 meters. Colonel Al-Mansouri, pointing toward different defensive positions and obviously coordinating the response to their infiltration. "Elena," Santos said urgently, "we need to make a decision, now." Elena realized that this was the moment when Captain Alexandra Morrison's experience would either save 16 lives or get everyone killed. The tactical situation had deteriorated rapidly, but the fundamentals of the mission remained unchanged. Eliminate the overwatch positions to allow the rescue team to advance. "We take the shots," Elena decided. "Modified sequence, Al-Mansouri first, then the overwatch positions." Santos looked at her with surprise. Al-Mansouri wasn't on the target list. "He is now," Elena said grimly. "He's the one coordinating there. Defense, take him out, and the others will lose coordination for critical seconds." Elena shifted her aim to the central courtyard, where Al-Mansouri was standing beside a communications antenna. At 800 meters, with the target now moving unpredictably and clearly aware of potential sniper threats. The shot was at the very limit of what was possible, but Elena had been waiting 3 years for a chance to finish what had been started in Syria. Al-Mansouri was responsible for dozens of terrorist attacks, hundreds of deaths, and now 16 kidnapped hostages. Whatever the personal risk, this might be her only opportunity to eliminate him permanently. Elena controlled her breathing and began her trigger squeeze. Through the scope, she could see Al-Mansouri barking orders into a radio, unaware that 800 meters away, the woman he had thought died in Syria was about to complete their interrupted encounter. The shot broke cleanly, and Elena watched through her scope as Al-Mansouri collapsed to the ground. The guards around him momentarily froze in confusion, uncertain where the shot had come from or whether their commander was dead or wounded. "Target down," Elena reported, already shifting to acquire the North Tower guard, but the compound was now fully alert. Guards were running for prepared positions, floodlights were sweeping the area, and Elena could hear the distant sound of diesel engines starting reinforcements or evacuation vehicles. "North Tower, 812 meters, Santos called. "Out," providing updated range information as Elena acquired her second target. The guard in the North Tower was no longer standing in the open. He had moved to a position behind sandbags, presenting only a partial target. Elena would have to thread the bullet through a gap barely 6 inches wide. Elena adjusted her aim point and fired. The guard in the North Tower spun backward and disappeared from view. "East wall," Santos called, identifying the third target. But the east wall guard had seen the muzzle flash from Elena's rifle and was now actively trying to spot their position. He was moving erratically, using available cover and pointing in their general direction. Elena's third shot caught him as he paused to scan the ridge with binoculars. 800 meters away, she watched him fall backward against the concrete wall. "All targets down," Elena reported. "Signal the rescue team." Santos keyed his radio. "Phoenix, this is Ghost. Package is delivered." "Repeat. Package is delivered." "Copy, Ghost. Phoenix is moving." Elena kept her rifle trained on the compound, ready to engage additional targets if they appeared. But the elimination of Al-Mansouri seemed to have created exactly the confusion they'd hoped for. Guards were running in different directions, some trying to reach defensive positions, others apparently trying to evacuate. Through her scope, Elena could see the rescue team's vehicles approaching the compound at high speed. 8 minutes from her first shot to their arrival at the objective, exactly as planned. "Time to move," Santos said, already packing the communications equipment. Elena secured her rifle and gathered her gear, but she kept watching the compound through binoculars as they prepared to withdraw. The rescue team was breaching the main gate, moving with the fluid precision of special operations professionals. Smoke grenades were creating concealment, and she could see team members advancing toward the hostage building. Then everything went wrong. An explosion erupted from the center of the compound, sending a pillar of black smoke into the morning sky. Elena felt the shock wave seconds later, a rolling thunder that spoke of significant quantities of high explosive. What the hell was that? Santos demanded. Elena focused her binoculars on the source of the explosion. Where the hostage building had been, there was now a pile of smoking rubble. The structure had been completely destroyed, imploded with professional efficiency. They blew the building, Elena said, her voice hollow with realization. With the hostages inside? Elena continued scanning the compound, hoping to see signs of survivors, evidence that the hostages had been moved before the building was destroyed. But the explosion had been too complete, too perfectly timed. The building had been rigged with explosives, probably for weeks, waiting for exactly this scenario. "Ghost, Phoenix Actual," came a voice over the radio. "Be advised, hostage building has been destroyed. No survivors visible. Repeat, no survivors." Elena felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. 16 military personnel, people who had volunteered for dangerous service, had been murdered rather than rescued. Her perfect shots, the flawless execution of the sniper mission, had accomplished nothing except to trigger a mass execution. "We need to move," Santos said urgently. "The compound is swarming with activity, and they'll be looking for the sniper position." Elena nodded mechanically, shouldering her rifle and following Santos away from the ridge. But part of her mind remained focused on the smoking ruins of the hostage building, trying to understand how the mission had gone so catastrophically wrong. They moved quickly back toward the coast, no longer concerned with stealth now that their position was almost certainly compromised. Elena could hear vehicles in the distance, probably search teams looking for the sniper who had eliminated Al-Mansouri and the Overwatch guards. "Phoenix Ghost," Santos called into his radio as they moved. "What's your status?" "Ghost Phoenix. We're extracting under fire. Building was rigged with explosives, detonated when we breached the perimeter. This was a trap. A trap." Elena realized with growing horror that the entire rescue operation had been anticipated. The terrorists had known they were coming, had prepared for exactly this type of assault. The hostages had probably been dead for hours, maybe days. "How?" Elena asked Santos. "How did they know?" "Unknown," Santos replied grimly. "But someone fed them information about our operational plans." Elena's mind raced through possibilities. The mission had been highly classified, with information compartmentalized between different agencies and military units. But someone with access to the operational details had warned the terrorists, allowing them to prepare the ultimate counter-move. They reached the extraction point with 20 minutes to spare, finding the SEAL boat operator waiting nervously in the concealed position where they'd left him. He could see from their expressions that the mission had not gone according to plan. "We need to go," the operator said. "Radio traffic indicates multiple hostile units converging on this area." Elena waded into the surf and climbed into the inflatable boat, her equipment heavy with the weight of failure. As the boat's engine started and they moved away from the Somali coast, she found herself staring back at the dark shoreline where 16 people had died despite her best efforts. The submarine was waiting exactly where it was supposed to be, its navigation lights providing a welcome beacon in the darkness. Elena climbed through the escape hatch, her legs unsteady from exhaustion and adrenaline crash. Commander Mitchell was waiting in the mission compartment, her expression grave. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "We monitored the radio traffic." "I know. This isn't the outcome anyone wanted." Elena slumped into a chair, still processing the magnitude of the mission's failure. She had made 3 perfect shots at 800 meters under combat conditions, had eliminated the targets exactly as planned. But none of it had mattered because the enemy had been one step ahead from the beginning. "There's something else," Mitchell continued. We've received new intelligence about the compound. Satellite imagery shows that the building wasn't just destroyed, it was gutted and rebuilt sometime in the last week. The hostages were never there. Elena looked up sharply. What do you mean? The building we thought contained the hostages was actually a decoy. Intelligence now believes the real hostages were being held in a different location entirely, possibly not even in Somalia. The revelation was staggering. Not only had the rescue mission failed, but it had been based on fundamentally flawed intelligence. Someone had fed them false information about the hostage location, drawing the rescue team into an elaborate ambush. So the hostages are still alive? Santos asked. Unknown, Mitchell replied. But they're definitely not where we thought they were. Elena felt a mixture of relief and rage. Relief that 16 people hadn't died because of her actions, rage. That she'd been manipulated into participating in what was essentially a military theater designed to eliminate her and the rescue team. Director Hayes needs to debrief you as soon as we return to Norfolk, Mitchell continued. This operation has implications that go beyond the immediate rescue mission. Elena understood. If the mission had been compromised from the beginning, if someone with access to classified operational plans had been feeding information to terrorists, then the security implications were enormous. Every current and planned operation involving the same personnel or agencies could be compromised. But Elena was also beginning to understand something else. She hadn't been recruited for this mission because of her sniper skills. She'd been recruited because someone wanted her in Somalia, wanted her to reveal herself, wanted her to emerge from the carefully constructed identity of Elena Vasquez. Commander, Elena said carefully, how many people knew the operational details of this mission? Mitchell considered the question. Limited distribution. Maybe 20 people total across all agencies and military units involved. And how many of those people knew about my involvement specifically? Even more limited, maybe 6 or 7 people. Elena felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. The mission had been compromised, but not by random security failure. Someone had specifically wanted to draw her out of hiding, to force Captain Alexandra Morrison to resurface. But why? What was so important about a supposedly dead military sniper that someone would orchestrate an elaborate deception involving fake hostages and terrorist attacks? As the submarine began its journey back to Norfolk, Elena found herself thinking about the red laser dot she'd seen at the shooting competition in Montana. Someone had been watching her even then, had probably been tracking her for months or years before finally deciding to force her hand. Elena Vasquez had been compromised long before she'd fired a shot in Somalia. The question was whether the woman behind that identity could survive whatever came next. The flight back to Montana took place in uncomfortable silence. Director Hayes and Agent Chun sat across from Elena in the private jet, but none of them seemed inclined to discuss the mission's failure or its implications. Elena stared out the window at the landscape passing below, thinking about the path that had led her from a shooting competition to a submarine in the Indian Ocean, to whatever revelation awaited her back in the United States. The hostages are safe, Hayes said finally. Intelligence agencies located them in a facility in Yemen. A successful rescue operation was conducted 6 hours ago. Elena felt relief wash over her. 16 people were alive who might have been dead if the Somalia operation had proceeded as originally planned. But the relief was tempered by the knowledge that she'd been manipulated from the beginning. So what was the real purpose of the Somalia mission? Elena asked. Hayes and Chun exchanged a look that Elena recognized. They were deciding how much truth to reveal, how much to continue concealing behind operational security. Colonel Al-Mansouri was a legitimate target, Chun said finally. His elimination was a strategic priority regardless of the hostage situation. But you could have eliminated him without involving me, Elena pointed out. Military assets could have handled that, Mission. Not without significant collateral damage and political complications, Hayes replied. A civilian contractor operating without official sanction provided the perfect cover. Elena understood now. She hadn't been recruited to rescue hostages, she'd been recruited to assassinate Al-Mansouri, while providing plausible deniability for the government agencies involved. The hostage rescue had been elaborate misdirection to justify her involvement. What happens now? Elena asked. Now you go back to being Elena Vasquez, Hayes said. You return to Montana, resume your normal life, and continue competing in shooting tournaments, and you'll never contact me again? Chun smiled slightly. We'll never contact you again unless circumstances require it. Elena recognized the qualifier. She would be left alone as long as her skills weren't needed for future operations. But the door would always remain open, and Elena Vasquez would always be vulnerable to recruitment when Captain Morrison's capabilities were required. The plane was beginning its descent toward Billings when Hayes handed Elena a small package. A token of appreciation for your service, he said. Elena opened the package to find a metal case containing a bronze star with V device for valor. The citation was made out to Captain Alexandra Morrison for actions in Somalia that had significantly contributed to the elimination of high-value terrorist targets. This is for official records only, Hayes explained. It will never appear in any public documentation, but it acknowledges what you accomplished. Elena studied the medal, thinking about the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She'd won a shooting competition as Elena Vasquez, accepted a military mission as Captain Morrison, and now she was being honored for an assassination that had never officially occurred. Thank you, Elena said, closing the metal case. But as the plane touched down in Montana, Elena realized that her problems were just beginning. She'd proven to herself and others that she couldn't escape her past, that the skills and experiences that defined Captain Alexandra Morrison would always be part of her identity. The question now was whether Elena Vasquez could coexist with that reality, or whether the carefully constructed normal life she'd built would eventually be consumed by the violence and moral ambiguity that had defined her military career. We're approaching the climactic moments of this epic tale, and the tension is at its peak. Creating stories of this scope and detail requires not just writing talent, but careful plotting, character development, and attention to every narrative thread. We've journeyed through nearly 40,000 words together, and I hope every moment has kept you engaged. If this story has drawn you in and kept you listening, please show your appreciation by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Share this epic with anyone who loves immersive storytelling, and hit that notification bell for more incredible adventures. Now let's witness how everything comes together in these final, crucial moments. Elena returned to her apartment in Billings to find everything exactly as she'd left it, and yet somehow completely different. The same furniture, the same photographs. On the walls, the same simple life she'd built for Elena Vasquez. But now it all felt like an elaborate stage set, props in a performance that she could no longer maintain with conviction. She set her rifle case in the corner where it had always stood, but now the weapon seemed like evidence of crimes rather than sporting equipment. The bronze star medal was hidden in a drawer beneath winter clothes, a secret honor for a mission that had never happened. Elena tried to return to her normal routine. She went to work at the sporting goods store, helping weekend hunters select ammunition and advising competitive shooters on equipment upgrades. She attended a local shooting club meeting, listening to enthusiastic discussions about technique and upcoming competitions, but everything felt hollow, artificial. Elena Vasquez was supposed to be excited about her victory at the International Precision Shooting Championship, supposed to be looking forward to the next level of competition. Instead, she found herself constantly scanning for threats, analyzing the tactical implications of every environment she entered. You seem different, "Since your hunting trip," observed Mike Patterson, the store manager, during her third day back at work. "More serious, more, I don't know, professional." Elena forced a smile. "Just tired. Alaska was more challenging than I expected. Well, you look like you lost some weight. And there's something about the way you move now. Like you're always ready for something." The observation was more perceptive than Elena had expected. Military training changed people in subtle ways that were difficult to conceal completely. Posture, situational awareness, the unconscious preparation for violence, all of it left marks that trained observers could recognize. "I spent a lot of time outdoors," Elena said. "Had to stay alert for wildlife." Mike seemed satisfied with this explanation, but Elena realized she would need to be more careful about concealing the changes the Somalia mission had caused. Elena Vasquez was supposed to be a civilian who'd never experienced combat, never killed another human being, never operated behind enemy lines in support of classified military operations. The phone call came on her fourth night back. The secure cell phone haze had given her buzzing with an encrypted message. "Coffee tomorrow, 0800, same place." Elena stared at the message for several minutes before deleting it. She'd hoped for more time to readjust to civilian life, to reinforce the Elena Vasquez identity before being drawn back into the world of military operations. But apparently, circumstances had other plans. The copper kettle was nearly empty when Elena arrived the next morning. Hayes was already there, sitting in the same booth they'd used for their first meeting, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee like any other customer. "Good morning," Hayes said as Elena slid into the booth across from him. "I trust you're readjusting well to civilian life?" "I was," Elena replied, "until you called." Hayes folded his newspaper and studied Elena's face carefully. "You look different, more focused. More like the person I expected to meet instead of the person you were pretending to be." Elena understood what he meant. The Somalia mission had stripped away some of the carefully constructed layers of Elena Vasquez's identity, revealing more of Captain Morrison underneath. It would take conscious effort to rebuild the civilian persona. "What do you want?" Elena asked. "There's been a development," Hayes said, "related to the Somalia operation and your involvement in it." Elena felt a chill of apprehension. "What kind of development?" Hayes slid a tablet across the table, displaying what appeared to be intelligence reports from multiple agencies. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications indicating that your identity has been compromised." Elena's blood turned cold. "Compromised how?" "Colonel Al-Mansouri didn't die immediately from your shot," Hayes explained. "He lived for approximately 40 minutes after being hit, long enough to provide his subordinates with information about who had killed him." Elena studied the intelligence reports, trying to understand the implications. If Al-Mansouri had identified her before dying, if he'd passed that information to other terrorist leaders, then Elena Vasquez was no longer safe. "What kind of information?" "He told them that the sniper who killed him was Captain Alexandra Morrison, the American operator he'd encountered in Syria 3 years ago. He also told them that Morrison had been using the identity of Elena Vasquez, competitive shooter from Montana." The revelation was devastating. Elena's carefully constructed cover identity had been blown, not by operational security failures or intelligence analysis, but by the dying words of the man she'd been sent to eliminate. "How do you know this?" Hayes touched the tablet screen, bringing up audio files with translation subtitles. NSA intercepted satellite phone communications between new caliphate cells in Somalia and Syria. Al-Mansouri's final message was transmitted to terrorist networks throughout the Middle East and North Africa. Elena listened to the translated conversations, hearing her real name and cover identity being discussed by people who now considered her a priority target. The life she'd built as Elena Vasquez had become a liability. making her location and daily routine known to enemies who had every reason to want revenge. "What's the threat assessment?" Elena asked. "Significant," Hayes replied. "Intelligence indicates at least 3 separate terrorist cells have been tasked with locating and eliminating you. They have your photograph, your address, your place of employment, and your competition schedule." Elena felt the walls of her civilian life closing in around her. She'd known this moment might come eventually, but she'd hoped for more time, more opportunity to prepare contingency plans. "What are my options?" "We can provide you with a new identity," Hayes said. "Complete relocation, new background, new life in a different part of the country. But it would mean abandoning everything you've built here." Elena thought about the people she'd come to know in Montana. Marcus Chun, who'd become a genuine friend despite their competitive rivalry. Rebecca Torres, who'd been mentoring her in advanced shooting techniques. Sarah Hoffman, who'd given her opportunities to prove herself in competition. Mike Patterson, who'd trusted her with increasing responsibilities at the store. All of it would have to be abandoned, left behind without explanation or goodbye. Elena Vasquez would simply disappear, leaving behind confused friends and unanswered questions. "What's the alternative?" Hayes's expression grew serious. "The alternative is that you accept that Elena Vasquez's cover has been blown and transitioned back to operating as Captain Morrison." "Operating how?" "There are situations developing in multiple theaters that require someone with your specific skill set," Hayes explained. "Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen all have high-value targets that need elimination by assets that don't officially exist." Elena understood what he was offering: a return to military operations, to the world of classified missions and plausible deniability. It would mean abandoning any pretense of normal civilian life, but it would also mean using her skills for purposes she understood and believed in. "And if I choose neither option?" Hayes's expression became grave. "Then you're on your own against terrorist cells that have been specifically tasked with killing you." Elena Vasquez becomes a target with no official protection and no government support. The choice was stark: accept a new identity and start over again, return to military operations as Captain Morrison, or remain as Elena Vasquez and face assassination. Attempts from professional terrorists. Elena realized that the shooting competition victory that had started this entire sequence of events had been the beginning of the end for her civilian life. By demonstrating her true capabilities, she'd made it impossible to maintain the careful balance between her 2 identities. "How long do I have to decide?" 72 hours, Hayes replied. "After that, we have to assume you've chosen to handle the situation independently." Elena nodded, understanding the implicit message. In 72 hours, if she hadn't accepted government protection or returned to military service, she would be on her own against whatever threats materialized. As Hayes prepared to leave, he handed Elena another secure phone. "If you decide you want our help, use this. But understand that once you make that call, Elena Vasquez disappears. Forever." After Hayes left, Elena sat in the diner for another hour, drinking coffee and trying to process the magnitude of her situation. 3 years of careful construction, of building relationships and establishing a normal life, was about to be destroyed by the consequences of a single perfect shot in Somalia. But as she thought about the alternatives, Elena realized that she'd been lying to herself about what kind of life she really wanted. The simple routine of Elena Vasquez had been satisfying in some ways, but it had also been limiting. She'd been using only a fraction of her capabilities, suppressing the skills and experiences that had defined most of her adult life. Captain Alexandra Morrison had been forged in combat, trained to make decisions that affected life and death, given responsibilities that most people couldn't even imagine. Elena Vasquez had been an attempt to escape that identity, but perhaps escape had never been realistic. Elena drove back to her apartment, knowing that she was probably seeing it for the last time. Whatever decision she made about her future, the life she'd built in Billings was ending. The only question was whether she would choose how it ended or let circumstances decide for her. As she packed her essential belongings into a single duffel bag, Elena found herself thinking about the bronze star medal hidden in her drawer. It was recognition for actions she'd taken as Captain Morrison, acknowledgement of a mission that had never officially happened, but had eliminated a terrorist leader, responsible for hundreds of deaths. Elena realized that she'd been trying to run from a part of herself that couldn't be escaped or denied. The skills that made her valuable to government agencies also made her a target for their enemies. There was no neutral ground, no way to exist between those two worlds without eventually being forced to choose. The secure phone Hayes had given her sat on her kitchen table, waiting for the call that would determine the rest of her life. Elena stared at it for several minutes, thinking about friendship and duty, civilian life and military service, Elena Vasquez and Captain Alexandra Morrison. Then she picked up the phone and made her choice. "This is Morrison," Elena said when Hayes answered the secure phone. There was a brief pause before Hayes responded, and Elena could hear the satisfaction in his voice when he spoke. "I was hoping you'd call. What's your decision?" "I want to discuss terms," Elena said. "I'm not interested in becoming a government asset again, but I'm also not naive enough to think I can handle trained assassins on my own. What did you have in mind?" Elena had spent the last 6 hours thinking through possibilities, analyzing options with the same methodical approach she used for long-range shooting problems. Independent contractor status. You provide intelligence and operational support when I need it, and I handle specific problems when you need someone who doesn't officially exist. "That's an unusual arrangement," Hayes said. "Most people in your situation prefer the security of official government protection." "Most people in my situation don't have my skill set," Elena replied. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, but I also don't want to disappear completely into a new identity. I want to control my own destiny." Hayes was quiet for several seconds, apparently considering the implications of Elena's proposal. "What you're suggesting would require a significant level of trust on both sides. I think Somalia demonstrated that I can be trusted to complete missions successfully," Elena said. "And I think the intelligence about the terrorist threats demonstrates that you have access to information I need." "There would be conditions," Hayes said finally. "Operational security requirements, communication protocols, limitations on your activities between missions." "I understand, but I want to maintain some independence." Elena Vasquez disappears, but Alexandra Morrison doesn't become a government employee. Elena heard papers rustling in the background, suggesting Hayes was consulting with others. "We'll need to meet in person to discuss the details. Can you be in Washington, D.C. tomorrow?" "I'll be there. There's a hotel called the Madison near the White House. Check in under the name. Sarah Mitchell will have identification prepared for you. Someone will contact you with meeting details." Elena understood that she was crossing another threshold. Move in from civilian life into a gray area between official government service and independent operation. It was a compromise that might allow her to use her skills while maintaining some control over her own life. But first, she had to survive long enough to reach Washington. Elena finished packing her belongings, keeping only what she could carry in a single bag. Everything else, furniture, photographs, mementos of her 3 years as Elena Vasquez, would be left behind. Someone else would have to clean out the apartment and dispose of the life she was abandoning. She was loading her rifle case into her pickup truck when she noticed the surveillance. A sedan with tinted windows was parked across the street, positioned to observe her apartment building. Elena couldn't see the occupants clearly, but the vehicle's positioning and the fact that she hadn't seen it in the neighborhood before suggested professional surveillance. Elena continued loading her truck. acting as if she hadn't noticed the sedan while her mind raced through tactical options. If terrorists had already located her, if they were prepared to act, she needed to control the engagement rather than let them choose the time and place. Elena climbed into her truck and started the engine, watching the sedan in her rearview mirror. As she pulled away from the curb, the sedan started its engine and began following at a discreet distance. Elena drove toward the interstate, maintaining normal speed and giving no indication that she'd detected the surveillance. But she was mentally preparing for combat, running through scenarios and options for dealing with multiple opponents and vehicles. The interstate on-ramp provided her first opportunity. Elena accelerated up the ramp, but instead of merging into traffic, she suddenly braked and pulled onto the shoulder. The sedan, caught off guard, had to continue past her position or risk exposing their surveillance. Elena watched as the sedan passed, noting 2 occupants and what appeared to be weapons visible in the back seat. She waited until they were committed to the interstate before accelerating back onto the surface streets. But Elena knew this was only a temporary advantage. Professional surveillance teams would have multiple vehicles and radio communication. Losing one tail didn't mean she was clear of the threat. Elena drove to a large shopping center, parking near the main entrance where there would be numerous witnesses and security cameras. If the terrorists wanted to attack her, they would have to do it in a public place with significant risk of exposure. She entered the shopping center through the main entrance, moving quickly but not obviously running. Elena needed to determine how many opponents she was facing and whether they were prepared for immediate action or just conducting surveillance. The answer came when she spotted the second team. 2 men in casual clothing were moving through the shopping center, trying to look like ordinary customers while obviously searching for someone. Their body language, their coordination, and their focus made them stand out to Elena's trained eye. Elena ducked into a sporting goods store, hoping the irony wasn't lost on whoever was tracking her. She moved to the back of the store, where hunting rifles were displayed behind a locked glass case. "Can I help you?" asked a young store employee. "I'm looking for hunting ammunition," Elena said, studying the store's layout and exits. "Something for long-range shooting." As the employee unlocked the ammunition case, Elena spotted one of the surveillance team members entering the store. He was trying to look casual, browsing fishing equipment near the front entrance, but his attention was focused on locating Elena. Elena made her purchase quickly, buying a box of rifle ammunition that she didn't need, but that would justify her presence in the store. As she headed toward the back exit, she noticed the surveillance team member speaking quietly into her radio. Elena exited through the store's rear entrance, finding herself in a service corridor that connected to the shopping center's loading dock area. It was quieter here, with fewer people and multiple exit routes, exactly the kind of environment she needed for what came next. Elena opened her rifle case and quickly assembled her weapon, loading it with the ammunition she just purchased. If the surveillance team was planning to attack rather than just observe, she intended to be ready. The service corridor provided excellent concealment and multiple sight lines covering the approaches from the main shopping center. Elena positioned herself where she could observe both the rear entrance of the sporting goods store and the main corridor leading to the loading docks. She didn't have to wait long. 2 men emerged from the sporting goods store, moving with the tactical coordination of people who'd trained together. They were armed. Elena could see the distinctive bulge of concealed weapons, and they were clearly searching for her. Elena had the advantage of position and preparation, but she was also in a public place where any shooting would endanger innocent people. She needed to control the engagement carefully, using minimum necessary force while protecting civilians. Elena called out from her concealed position, "You're looking for me?" Both men spun toward the sound of her voice, their hands moving toward their weapons. Elena could see their faces clearly, now Middle Eastern features, the lean look of people who'd spent time in combat zones. Captain Morrison, one of them said in accented English. Colonel Al-Mansouri sends his regards from paradise. The colonel is dead, Elena replied, keeping her rifle trained on the speaker. I put a bullet through his chest in Somalia. Yes, the man said with a cold smile. And now we put bullets through yours. Both men went for their weapons simultaneously, drawing pistols with practiced speed. But Elena had been ready for exactly this moment, had been prepared since the surveillance. Her rifle fired twice in rapid succession, 2 shots separated by less than a second. Both men collapsed to the concrete floor of the service corridor. Their weapons unfired. Elena quickly cleared the area, gathering her equipment and moving toward the loading dock exits. She had perhaps minutes before police responded to reports of gunshots, and she needed to be far away before that happened. But as Elena reached the loading dock, she realized the situation was more complex than she'd anticipated. 2 more vehicles were pulling into the area, containing additional members of the terrorist cell. She'd eliminated the immediate threat, but there were more opponents than she'd expected. Elena took cover behind a delivery truck, using her rifle scope to assess the new threats. 6 more people, all armed, spreading out to surround the loading dock area. Professional coordination, military-style tactics. Elena was outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in an area with limited escape routes. But she also had advantages: superior position, better weapons, and extensive training in exactly this type of combat situation. The battle for her survival was about to begin in earnest. Elena used the delivery truck as cover while she engaged the first wave of attackers. Her rifle was designed for long-range precision, not close-quarters combat, but Elena had trained with the weapon in multiple scenarios. The first attacker tried to flank her position, moving along the line of parked vehicles in the loading dock. Elena's shot caught him as he emerged from cover, dropping him before he could bring his weapon to bear. The second attacker tried a more direct approach, advancing across open ground while his companions provided covering fire. Elena's shot took him center mass, the impact spinning him backward into a stack of shipping pallets. But Elena realized she was running low on ammunition, and the remaining attackers were learning from their companions' mistakes. They were using better cover, coordinating their movements, trying to pin her down while they maneuvered for flanking shots. Elena needed to change her position to avoid being trapped behind the delivery truck. She gathered her equipment and prepared to move, but before she could act, she heard the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching. Elena looked up to see a black helicopter circling the loading dock area. Its side doors opened to reveal additional armed personnel. The terrorist cell had brought air support, turning what had been a manageable ground engagement into something much more dangerous. But as Elena prepared for the helicopter to deploy additional attackers, she noticed something unexpected. The helicopter wasn't landing, it was engaging the terrorist. Positions with precision fire from above. Elena realized that Hayes had been monitoring her situation, had deployed a response team when the terrorist attack began. The helicopter crew was eliminating the remaining ground threats while providing Elena with an opportunity to escape. Within minutes, the loading dock area was secure. The terrorist cell had been eliminated, their vehicles disabled, their planned assassination attempt completely disrupted. Elena emerged from cover as the helicopter landed, recognizing Agent Chun among the tactical team that stepped out of the aircraft. "Time to go," Chun said, gesturing toward the helicopter. "We have about 5 minutes before local law enforcement arrives, and you don't want to be here for that conversation." Elena gathered her equipment and climbed into the helicopter, watching the shopping center recede below as they lifted off. She'd survived her first encounter with Al-Mansouri's revenge, but she understood it wouldn't be the last. As the helicopter flew toward an uncertain destination, Elena realized that her transition from Elena Vasquez to Captain Morrison was now complete. There was no going back to civilian life. No return to the simple routine she'd built in Montana. Whatever came next, she would face it as the woman she'd always been underneath the carefully constructed identity. A soldier trained to kill at extreme distances. Someone who'd chosen to use those skills in service of ideals larger than herself. The war for her survival had begun. But Elena was ready for whatever came next. The safe house was located in rural Virginia, a nondescript farmhouse, surrounded by rolling hills and horse pastures. Elena spent the next 3 days in debriefings, medical evaluations, and planning sessions that would determine the structure of her new life. Director Hayes had brought in specialists from multiple agencies, psychologists, operational planners, intelligence analysts, and tactical experts. All of them wanted to understand how Elena had managed the transition from military service to civilian life and back again. "Your psychological profile shows remarkable stability," said Dr. Sarah Chun, a clinical psychologist who shared a name but no relation to Agent Chun. "Most people who've experienced your level of combat stress show significant indicators of PTSD, depression, or other adjustment disorders." Elena considered how to respond. The truth was that she'd compartmentalized her military experiences so effectively that Elena Vasquez had been able to function normally for 3 years. But that compartmentalization had also made it easier to return to Captain Morrison's mindset when circumstances required it. "I learned to separate the job from the person," Elena said finally. "Military operations were something I did, not something I was. But they were something you were very good at," observed Colonel James Patterson, the military liaison assigned to evaluate Elena's future operational potential. "Your performance in Somalia was exemplary, especially considering the degraded intelligence and hostile tactical situation." Elena appreciated the professional assessment, but she was more interested in the practical arrangements being discussed. "What exactly are you proposing for my future operations?" Hayes consulted a thick file containing legal documents and operational protocols. "Independent contractor status with a specific mandate for counter-terrorism operations. You would maintain operational independence while having access to intelligence and logistical support." "What kind of operations?" Agent Chun activated a large display screen showing a world map with red indicators in multiple locations. "High-value targets in non-permissive environments. Situations where conventional military action would be politically impossible, but where elimination of specific individuals would significantly degrade terrorist capabilities." Elena studied the map, recognizing several locations where she'd operated during her military career. Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, all areas where ongoing conflicts made surgical operations both necessary and deniable. "How many targets are we discussing?" "Currently, 17 individuals across 6 countries, Hayes replied. "All confirmed terrorist leaders responsible for planning or executing attacks against American interests. All in locations where military strikes would be impossible or inadvisable." Elena understood the scope of what was being proposed. 17 assassinations, each requiring extensive planning, careful infiltration, and precise execution. It would be a multi-year commitment that would define the rest of her professional life. "What about the terrorist cells targeting me? The people who want revenge for Al-Mansouri's death?" "Intelligence indicates there are at least 6 active cells, with your elimination as a priority objective," Agent Chun said. "But your new operational status would provide significant resources for dealing with those threats." Elena realized that the terrorist threat wasn't necessarily a problem to be solved, it was an opportunity to be exploited. By allowing herself to be targeted, she could draw terrorist operatives into engagements where they could be eliminated systematically. "You want me to be bait," Elena said. "We want you to be a hunter," Hayes corrected. "The terrorists hunting. You are high-value targets themselves. Eliminating them serves multiple operational objectives." Elena spent